It was just past midnight when I first heard the knock, soft but steady, almost rhythmic, like someone was tapping out a slow beat. At first, I thought I imagined it. The house was quiet, too quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I sat on my couch, flipping through the channels aimlessly, trying to distract myself from the odd tension I'd been feeling all night. The street outside was unusually still, not a single car had passed in the last hour, and the wind, which usually howled around the trees, had gone completely silent. Then came the knock again. This time, I was certain it was real. 3 deliberate taps, followed by a pause. Then 3 more. My hand hesitated over the remote, suddenly aware of just how alone I was. I live in a small, sleepy neighborhood where nothing ever happens, especially not after midnight. Nobody visits at this hour. I swallowed hard and stood up, slowly making my way toward the door. The air felt thick, like walking through molasses. I could hear my heart thudding in my chest as I reached for the doorknob. 1,000 thoughts ran through my head. What if it was a burglar? What if someone needed help? What if... I opened the door just a crack, peering through the sliver. 2 children stood on my front porch, a boy and a girl no older than 10, dressed in strange, old-fashioned clothes. Their skin was pale, almost unnaturally so, and their hair hung limp around their faces. They didn't move or speak. They just stood there, staring up at me. Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound calm, but my voice wavered. The girl was the first to speak. Her voice was low, too low for a child her age. "We're lost. We need to come inside." Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. I couldn't place it, but every instinct screamed at me to shut the door, to lock it, and never look back. But they were just kids, weren't they? Where are your parents?" I stammered, glancing around to see if anyone else was with them. "They'll be here soon," the boy said. His voice was just like hers, flat, emotionless. "Please, let us in. We're cold." That's when I noticed something was off. The way they stood, perfectly still, their hands at their sides. Their faces were blank, no expression at all, as if they were rehearsing lines for a play they didn't understand. And then it hit me, their eyes. They were black, entirely black. No whites, no irises, just endless, inky pools staring up at me. I took a step back, my hand tightening on the edge of the door. "I don't think I can let you in. Maybe you should." "Please," the girl interrupted, her voice firmer this time. "We need to come inside. You have to let us in." The air around me felt colder, the temperature seeming to drop by the second. I could feel a pressure building in my chest, like the atmosphere itself was pressing down on me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as an overwhelming sense of dread washed over me. "I'm sorry, I can't." "You have to let us in," the boy said, his voice growing sharper, almost demanding now. Both of them took a step closer, standing just inches from the threshold. Their black eyes bore into mine, and for a moment I felt something tugging at the edge of my thoughts, something pulling me toward the door, toward them. I blinked and shook my head, snapping myself out of it. I slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. My heart was racing, and I could barely breathe. What the hell were they? From the other side of the door, I heard them knocking again. 3 taps, then 3 more. "Let us in." Their voices came in unison now, cold and hollow. I backed away from the door, stumbling into the living room. The knocking didn't stop. "Let us in." I reached for my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone, but the screen was blank. Dead. No signal, no power, nothing. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and for a split second, the house was plunged into complete darkness. When the lights came back on, the knocking had stopped. I froze, straining to hear. Nothing. Just silence. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that they were gone, that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Then there was a tap at the window. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The girl's face was pressed against the glass, her black eyes locked onto mine. She smiled, but it wasn't a child's smile. It was too wide, too cold. "Let us in," she whispered. I stumbled backward, tripping over the coffee table. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening, but nothing about this was logical. Nothing about this was human. Another knock, this time from the kitchen window. The boy was there, his face expressionless, his black eyes staring through me. "We won't leave until you let us in." I ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I couldn't stay in that room any longer. I sprinted upstairs, slamming the door to my bedroom and locking it behind me. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I could feel the cold seeping through the walls. For a few minutes, everything was quiet again. I sat on the floor, hugging my knees, trying to calm my racing mind. Maybe they'd give up. Maybe they'd leave. Then I heard the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming up the stairs. I held my breath, pressing myself against the door, praying that the lock would hold. The footsteps stopped right outside my room. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, a soft voice. "Please, let us in." I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it all to go away. The air in the room felt heavy, oppressive, like something was pressing down on my chest. My thoughts were growing foggy, harder to hold on to. It was like they were pulling at my mind, trying to wear me down. Another knock. This time, it came from inside the room. I opened my eyes, my heart dropping into my stomach. The boy and the girl stood at the foot of my bed, their black eyes staring down at me. "You should have let us in." The last thing I saw was their faces, twisted into unnatural smiles as they stepped closer, their eyes pulling me into an abyss. And then, everything went dark. Now I sit here in the dark, waiting for the next knock on the door, for the next person to let them in. Because once you see them, once you know they exist, they never really leave.